Welcome to this week's Real Lawyers podcast. It's my opportunity to get to sit down with people that have been influential in the law, particularly through publishing. And one person I've gotten to know very well through blogging is Matt DeVries, who's been publishing since back when I started LexBlog and made himself, one heck of a name in the process. So oftentimes with the podcast, I learn as much as you, my audience, might learn in hearing from folks. So welcome, Matt. It's great to have you. And to give you a context on Matt, he's come through different areas. He started clerking before practicing, gets into a larger firm, goes into a smaller firm, always focused on construction. And now today, into a much, much larger firm. So welcome, Matt. Great to have you on board.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. It's great to see you. I know you said from the very beginning, I think it's been 16, 17 years, so.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I mean, you were writing, if you're clerking after law school, obviously getting that clerking opportunity, people saw the potential you had in writing, and then you get in there and you're writing, you're publishing. I mean, how did it all come about that you became a writer or were influenced into writing as a law student, law grad, and then into a young lawyer?
Well, actually, it started back in undergrad. I was a political science major in American University, and I started working on Capitol Hill for the senator. And I really got into research and writing then. I was writing constituent letters. We'd get letters from constituents, would write in about a particular bill, and you'd do research about it and draft something. So I really enjoyed that. And just by chance of an injury, I didn't go straight into law school after my undergrad. I took 2 years off, and I found myself working at a law firm. And I was at a law firm in Virginia Beach, and I was drafting a lot of briefs and written statements. I drafted a couple of briefs to Supreme Court of Virginia, Court of Appeals of Virginia, Court of Appeals of the Fourth Circuit, and I even drafted a petition for cert for the U.S. Supreme Court, and this is before law school. So I had learned how to write legal writing. So it was almost as if law school was something I had to do just to become a lawyer, because I was ready to practice law already. And that's really what got me into writing. And so after I graduated University of Richmond, I started clerking with the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of Virginia, and continued. That was my favorite part of legal practice, was the advocacy, particularly in the writing, and then in oral argument and presenting. So that's how I really had a passion for writing and clean writing and incorporating storytelling into my writing.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling a mouthful, right there. Because usually it's kids like me that just wanted to go up and be a lawyer because I saw Perry Mason and my grandfather watching it on TV. And I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, but I argued with people, so I became a lawyer and always wanted to get into the courtroom. You were able to get out and apply certain skills that the lawyer used beforehand, and then says, okay, this can be used as a lawyer. So kudos to you for getting for.
Well, yours was Perry Mason. Mine, I hate to admit this, and maybe some of your listeners would connect with this. I had LA law syndrome. So I was going to law school because I wanted the convertible car, and I saw LA law syndrome, but I got out into practice and started getting into construction law.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that you mentioned either in a blog post or an article, the influence of the LA law. Now, I thought that might have been, but I looked at your age, and you're a little bit younger than me. LA law for me was influencing me as I just started as a lawyer. And I'm thinking, those people are in a totally different world than I am in LA. I went to school in California, but I practiced in Wisconsin. There was no LA. There was no Arnie Becker in Wisconsin when I was practicing. Yeah, I think there are always legal shows that come along, and I'm sure influence people as young lawyers or wannabe lawyers, or that looks cool. Or you're afraid of blood, so you can't be a doctor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So out of law school, I was practicing in DC in construction law, and I kind of fell into construction law. I didn't have any background. I had three opportunities at a small firm who had like 2 or 3 IP attorneys. Then a medium-sized firm was a construction law firm, and then a big Chicago-based firm. And I didn't want to do document production for the first 6 years of my practice, so I went with that medium firm, and that was a construction firm. And really what got me into blogging, and particularly reaching out to you, was when I moved from DC to Tennessee. I was married at the time. I had 3 kids, and I wanted to get out of the rat race of DC. And so we found ourselves moving to Nashville, Tennessee. And I was competing with every good old boy who was born and raised in the South, who went to some CC alma mater school. It was crazy, Kevin, because Monday morning would come around and everyone's talking about SEC football, and I didn't even know the Securities Exchange Commission had a football team. Um, so it was a great indoctrination to SEC, but I was competing with other attorneys my age.
Right.
And here, everyone knew somebody, went to Vanderbilt, University of Tennessee, Alabama. They all knew each other. And here was this guy who was practically a Yankee from DC and in Tennessee, and I had to put myself apart. And so I think Twitter had just came out. I figured I needed to do something different. And I did my own blog. I got onto WordPress and I tried to figure it out. And for the first 2 years, I was just struggling. And I remember I did construction blog, BLAWG.
Yep.
And I was writing about anything potential construction. I mean, if it had to do with construction, I'd stick it up there. And on any given day, there was just no rhyme or reason to what I was posting. And I think at that time, I just started Googling things, and I came across you and your network, and you had been out doing it a couple years. I think you had been
Right.
just 2 years old at that time, and that's when I reached out to you. And I remember my first conversation with you, and
I remember it
from
as
there, it
well.
was just awesome. It was just been a great ride with you. So that's how I got onto the network with you and really changed how I started writing.
You know, and it's, I hearken back to those days where I could remember the first individual conferences with the lawyers. It's changed so much because lawyers like you had some success in building a name. And then people from a distance wanted to figure out what it was about, but maybe they weren't lawyers and couldn't understand what it meant to build a name as a lawyer and the competition you went through, the stress that you go through, and how do you build a name and get work? Because it's not easy
Mhm.
having a family and figuring out how you're going to get that work. Um,
Yeah.
you know, is it going to be a good year or a bad year type of thing? So I do remember that time we first talked, and we talked about the blog that you were doing, and it was everything from construction to family to all over. And I remember trying to. Well, I think we talked about, what can we do to get it focused on a niche that would get you really known, and what would the focus be in the information you would convey? But you certainly you become a star in the legal
Well, I
blogosphere over
appreciate that.
time. From that point on, I mean, what's the name of your blog? We should mention
So
that.
I think you and I struggled with this because even then, some of your teammates and your design people were trying to say, we got to put the name blog in there or something.
Right.
And I wanted in the construction industry, I'd been at this point a construction lawyer for about 10 years. And one thing many contractors do is post production or post project, they go through a evaluation and they identify best practices on a project of what worked, what didn't work. And it's also a term of art, certainly across industries, but in the construction industry, best practices within construction was something that just really rang. And so I just wanted to focus on best practices construction law. And I even think I fought with some of your initial people that they said, well, Matt, you got to put reporter or blog or update or
It could
something
have
there.
been.
And I said, no, I just want best practices construction law. So
Truth be told, I mean, maybe the time you contacted us, maybe had 15 blogs, because I started it in 2004. Somebody said, "You're doing what? Blogs are free." I said, "Yeah, but lawyers don't really know what they're doing." If I was practicing law and somebody told me to start publishing on the internet, I'd say I'd be scared to death. If we can come up with a guarantee that will guarantee not just that we'll do a good job, but they'll have business development success, we'll be okay. Man,
yeah,
it was like 7 at the first year, 15 at the end of the second year, and then it came up with, was the names at the end of them. And I can remember a person that you may have talked to at that time, a person that just came back to our company after 15 or 18 years. He used to have on his wall a list of all the names, and I did too. Anything from reporters to tribunes to insights to
uh-huh.
insider. The idea was, what would somebody look at as a magazine out there if it was very or whatever. But man, when I went to look today to find information on construction law, there you were,
Yep.
at the top of Google, for that name. So kudos to you for
Well, I
doing the right
appreciate that.
thing.
Appreciate that.
When you publish a blog post, you just sit down to share something or write something, what's going through your head? What are you trying to do?
Well, I could tell you where I started and where I am now. So where
Go
I
ahead.
started, like I said, I was posting anything. I was like, if it's construction related, maybe I'm noteworthy within the industry. And I found out real early on, and I started this thing in May of 2009, I believe, was my first post. Maybe it's 2007, probably 2009. Had my first post, and I quickly learned that I was not a reporter. That was not going to be my job.
Right.
We had greats like, I don't know if you remember Chris Cheatham, Green
Yep.
Building Law Update. I mean, he was following legislation and everything that was coming out with the Green Building Council and lead APs and all that. He was updating regularly, and I was not going to be a reporter on the construction industry. And I
Right.
learned that real early. And I also learned that I was not going to be a scholarly article. These posts were not going to be in-depth analysis of case law. I wanted to have a different style of writing. And this really, when I came across one of my mentors at the time, I think you know him, Cordell Parvin, a longtime construction lawyer. Cordell actually went to University of Richmond. And so I had reached out to him. He was just became a mentor of mine. And Cordell really looked at me and he says, Matt, your writing really, people hire lawyers, they don't hire law firms. And that was something that stuck with me over the years. And he said, Matt, you are a dad. You have a lot of kids. You have a lot of chaos in your life. And that's who you are, and you do it well. So you need to bring that out in your writing. And that's something I talked with you about early on. And so I think for me, my style of writing has remained the same. And that is, I'm very personable. I use Matt language. I'm
Yeah.
not a lawyer. I don't use legalese. And I usually write whatever's on my mind, but something that Cordell taught me was, Matt, you need to find out what your client's problems are and write about their problems and come up with solutions. And so whether it's something I identify in something that is I've come across for a client problem, or I still scour Westlaw and Lexis and I get updates and I find out, oh, here's a new case. Well, I don't just take the case and pull it apart. I look at the case and say, okay, what's the real lesson here? And then I backtrack. So that's how I've over the years, I think there's a constant that's remained that I still do that today,
Y-
you know.
Yeah, because it goes all the way back to message boards and writing answers back to AOL days and putting content on the internet with my previous company, Prairie Law. Um, and I used to tell lawyers, just have everybody in the firm write down the questions they're getting, and just call it blog at the top, and just make a list. At the end of the week, you'll have 5 or 10 somewhere, and just pick one. That's your blog post, and just pretend that you're sitting down with somebody at the end of a bar having a beer, and they ask you that question, and you gotta explain it the way you would. It's you. I like the way you describe it. It's Matt. They're going to get it as the way that Matt talks, based on his background, his family, his upbringing, everything. It's lost sometime today. I mean, I hear things like, it has to be so many words or it won't count. It's too long and it doesn't count. It doesn't have the right keywords in it.
Yes.
You mentioned another lawyer that cited something. You can't do that. It takes away all of what I would describe almost as like a conversation that you put out there. You're listening to what the problems might be, and you're starting to answer them in your own voice. Is there something about you that enjoys serving people? Does that motivate you to some extent in doing the blog and just talking to people?
I've always been a people person. I certainly, over the years, my focus has changed. We talked about LA law syndrome and big law, and I started at a medium-sized firm, and it really hit probably the first month of practice. I had a general sessions court in Virginia. It was a general district court, and it was a $15,000 payment dispute representing a painting subcontractor. And that guy came to me, and I talked to him before trial, and really that $15,000 we were suing for was going to pay for diapers and food for his kids.
Right.
And the light bulb went off in my head. I have friends that were downtown that had been doing document production and billed 20 hours that day going through documents. And I'm like, hey, Matt, what you're doing really does make a difference. And so even though the type of construction disputes that pay the bills, or, the multi-million dollar construction defect cases. But on the other end, I represent a lot of contractors, and what we do makes a difference in all the people's lives that we affect. So I think that is not lost in my representation of clients. And outside of that, over the years, I went through a divorce over last 20 years, married for 18 years, went through a divorce, been divorced about 6 years. Lawyers have a lot of challenges we go through between stress, addictions, and everything that's on us outside of construction law. That's one area where I want to, look to the future, is figure out how can I help the talents I've been given and the blessings I've been given. How can I help other lawyers in the field deal with those issues? But certainly technology has changed over the years, and that affects even my blog writing.
Yeah, I mean, you had a separate blog, on family
Yep.
and life and whatnot for a while, and I pulled out an article. I mean, anybody could find this looking up. Matt, it's an article in Practical Lawyer from February of 20. It's a great article for lawyers that are in that first 1 to 5 years, whether it's a small firm or a larger firm, especially larger, as to the things you really need to keep in mind to build a name, keep your sanity, raise a family.
Keep your
Either
sanity. I never said I kept my sanity.
You didn't say it, but let me tell you, you're reading this, and I'm thinking, you're telling people, hey, if you think this is actually going to happen, it's probably not. So here's what you need to do, and you explained, you know, going through the rainy days, and you're going to need to, like what I was hearing you say was there was an author and business coach, God, and I can't, Harvey McKay, who said you got to dig your well before you get thirsty. And I used to think of that with Cordell Parvin, who had coached a lot of lawyers on business development, and he was all over the writing, that if you could dig your well before you got thirsty, if you blogged to build a name, your clients were coming
Yeah.
by referral. Other people had heard about you. They read somewhere that somebody cited you. All of that, went on. Was there a time when the light bulb went on that, wow, this actually works to generate business, to get out here and be myself on the internet? Because I can remember personally, I'm wondering for you.
I think there were probably many light bulbs. They weren't direct. I think the first light bulb that goes off is the fact that you become a thought leader.
Right.
That is, I don't think that the type of clients I have, I represent large developers, owners and developers, and major construction contractors. So I don't think that they go looking for attorneys and they Google construction attorney. Now that was cool with the SEO and search
Right.
engine optimization back then. If you said best construction attorney back then, I was always top of the rung. I mean, I was 1, 2, or 3 because of the name of the blog and a lot of
Right.
but things have changed now with algorithms. So I'm no longer at that, but clients aren't hiring me because of that. But what
Right.
they do hire you is when they find out Matt DeVries, they go type in Matt DeVries and boom, article here, publication here, speaking here. And that's all just raised awareness. So that was one light bulb that went off. Also getting those speaking opportunities. I had I don't know. You have a bucket list, Kevin. I've had
Yeah.
a bucket list of personal life and a bucket list of career life. And one of those bucket list items was to speak at a national AGC convention. That's Association of General Contractors.
Right.
That is the major organization. And I'd say within 3 years after moving to Nashville, Tennessee, just through blogging and writing and getting opportunities, I got my opportunity. I was selected to speak at the AGC National Convention. So that would not have happened but for blogging.
Right.
One of my other major bucket list items, there's the major trade publication. It's called ENR, which is Engineering News Record. That is the construction source. And I went back and I was looking at some old archives. In 2012, they picked up one of my blog posts and they republished it in ENR. Well, that led to 3 to 4 years later, one of the editors had reached out to me and asked me to write an actual column for ENR. Again, those things would not have come about but for opening the road to the internet and publishing real-time information through my blog.
Yeah, and there's some things you said that are still lost on lawyers because they grew up with only the internet. And so somebody that, went to college, that there was only Google. How could you find anybody other than Google? And you'd Google everything and that would be it. I think is lost that even the studies today indicate, a Clio study came out, heavily surveyed people. The number one way that people find a lawyer is by referral from a co-employee, friend, relative, some relationship. Um, and then they go look up the person's name, and then
Correct.
they see like you just described. And I'm telling people it's not the traffic that is coming to your site. It's when somebody looks you up and sees what you do. If you've been following an industry and expressing your insight on issues in it and answers to questions, I'll take that lawyer
Yeah.
uh, that's been following it. And I think people, can't leave their common sense at the door on that type of issue. As far as, your drive for life, you've got 7 kids, right?
Correct. 2
Yeah.
grandkids now.
Yeah, so do I. Time goes fast. What'd your parents do that motivated you to do all this stuff? Somehow it comes from our roots.
Well, my dad was former Air Force. He ended up going into fast food service industry, went through McDonald's, Hamburger University.
Really?
Um, I got to tell you, Kevin, when you're 12 years old and your dad works at McDonald's, you are the coolest kid in school. And then you get to high school and your dad works at McDonald's, you're not so cool anymore. But yeah, he was director of Southwest, and then he had his own restaurant for a while. But he went back to school after 20 years and went into seminary. And so he
Really?
became a pastor. So
Wow.
I think part of that service, the work ethic and just serving others came from my upbringing in a really strong, stable household. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and told me and my brother that we could do no wrong and we can be as great as we want to be. So we just had that instilling of great values from both of them.
Yeah, and I asked that question because when you read about somebody's background, you read a few of their blog posts, and you get that kind of feel. Okay, this didn't just happen by accident. Some things grew out of their life and their opportunity to serve. When we were talking before the blog post, and we were talking a little bit about what LexBog's up to now, and we might talk after about it. One of the things it was interesting. You use ChatGPT for
которые бы упростили мне и сделали чтение более приятным и выбор книг более быстрым и легким. Недавно я решила, которые бы упростили мне и сделали чтение более приятным и легким. Недавно я решила для себя открыть плоский мир Терри Пратчетта и наткнулась на такую проблему, как понятие того, с какой книги начать этот прекрасный. Для себя открыть плоский мир Терри Пратчетта и наткнулась на такую проблему, как понятие того, цикл, потому что в этом цикле есть еще подцикл про разных героев. И когда я благодаря интернету определилась.
Why don't I share it with other lawyers that are stressed out of their mind that don't know how to get work against the big boys? So
Yeah.
service is a great trait to have. Sometimes it's hard to keep all the time to focus on other people. I don't know if you
Yeah.
find that a struggle sometimes in your practice, in your blogging and that type of thing, staying focused on service.
It's really not. I guess when it comes year
Я как
end,
юный
you're
чтец
running around and
отметила
trying
для
to
себя
get your
несколько
revenues, you get your final bills. Maybe not so much, but again, I'm only here because of my clients. They are why this is a service oriented industry, and we got to remember that.
Yeah. Well, would you tell young lawyers now? I mean, because their heads are spinning in all different ways. What is AI going to do to them? And they pick up an article in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and it's saying that lawyers are going to be left off the rung pretty early, along with computer engineers and whatnot. They're being told a lot of different things about how you market a
Yeah.
practice and how you have to do things to show up on the internet and whatnot. What would you tell them? You were sitting there talking to a group of law students. Professor brought you in and said, give me your advice.
I think it goes back to story. I mean, this is still we are professionals, and as much as AI is doing a lot of things out there that can assist us, I don't think AI or computers or technology will ever replace your soul and who you are. I think that even something as simple as blogging, what it's meant for me, technology and AI has changed that the window of opportunity has shortened because everyone out there is using it. And I could tell which attorneys are using ChatGPT to post and which ones are not. What I would tell a new lawyer, and I mentor 2 young lawyers in my office, is again, this idea of work-life balance is not a key phrase. I mean, it's something you really have to figure out. And as somebody who was married, close to 20 years, and I went through a pretty contentious divorce, that's nothing I planned for, nothing I wanted. I was able to continue practice of law and maintain a very strong relationship with my kids. I got custody of my kids. I could only do that because I was still committed to a bigger purpose. So I would say, just as it was 20 years ago when Cordell was, breathing life into me, saying, Matt, law is not going to be everything, but if you can tie your purpose into your career, then I think you're going to go a long way. And I did that. It just happened to fall in the world of construction. It could have been employment, could have been,
Right.
some other area. That doesn't change who I was, because I don't have any construction background, but I've done great as a construction lawyer for the last 20 years.
Yeah, listening to the issues, getting to know the people, what their issues might be, developing that word of mouth reputation so people trust you when they come in. I think it's lost on sometimes young lawyers that you can go out there and you can actually build a name while you're in law school by sharing your insight and commentary based on the observations you're making. It's doable by being yourself. I guess everybody else is gone, so you got to be yourself. Your area of your blog is construction, which is a niche compared to employment or workers' comp or something else. What do you think about the importance of niches and developing a niche expertise? What do you tell people? What would you tell a lawyer today?
I think it's just as relevant 20 years ago. It's just as relevant today that it was 20 years ago. And that is, as a generalist, I think you're going to have a hard time finding who's your client as a generalist. I have friends who are great general commercial litigators. I don't know how you, I'm sure that you have them. You probably have them on your network of just a commercial litigation blog. It's just a bigger net. Whereas again, as a niche, I know that I'm going to be dealing with CEOs, accountants, project, all the way to laborers. So I still have different target audiences within construction, but it just helps me refine what I'm doing out there. And again, I fell into it, Kevin. It's just, I had no construction background. Everyone that worked at the first firm I was at either grew up on a construction site, was an architect, an engineer, or had some kind of tie. I was one of very few who had any construction experience, but I wanted to litigate, and I just have been very successful in staying in that area. Outside of that, when I moved to Nashville, I started helping out some entertainment clients that had big construction disputes. So that's an area where I kind of branched out of construction, and I do a lot of, I'd say probably about 25% of my work is entertainment work, just because they were entertainers who had construction disputes. Now they just liked Matt, and they continue to come back to me for non-construction stuff.
Yeah, that's what Greg Siskine had said. He goes, well, I'm doing immigration, but it's hard to avoid the entertainment industry and the other things that go on.
Yeah.
In the city. From Lexbog's standpoint and Lexbog's network, and I'll just ask you selfishly, how can we help lawyers today? We've had this publishing platform that lawyers use that's stable, and we can support you and guide you. We're in the process of developing a network, and we've always had the network of our customers, but now let's make it more of a network of anybody that publishes.
Yeah.
So that maybe it's people that want to look for opportunities, and that where's the spot that isn't being covered type of thing. And then as a result of that, the large publishers of secondary law are now recognizing for the first time, Matt, that somebody like you could be credible in what you have to say. So, a large firm that is using their services, probably more valuable than law review articles are what lawyers have written in their publishing over the last 15, 20 years, etc. So now we're working with them to funnel, good, citable, credible information into that environment. How do you think we can help lawyers that are publishers, if you will? What comes to your mind?
Well, if you're starting out with new publishers, I don't know what kind of training and resources you give the younger groups to help them along. I think that would be an area
Critical.
worth exploring, bringing along some veterans to come in and help train the next generation. Because again, there's a lot of people out there just throwing AI at. I mean, they're saying this will do it for you, and people are buying into that. And I don't think you can replace the personality that really makes connection for people. Outside of that is, again, I think expanding your network and your presence. My blog had been chosen probably for 8 or 9 years in a row, the top construction blog with JD Supra.
Right.
And I know there were other publisher content, but early on, I always liked, I don't know if this was the vanity in me, I'd always check the Lex blog, weekly posts of the week
Top
that
10.
you would send a newsletter out, and I'd find Matt DeVries' name up there. So I love seeing that. But it was also, I got a chance to scour those things because outside of my practice area, I knew you guys were putting up good posts. So if you're highlighting somebody that is posting something that is worth seeing or worth reading, and it's reputable enough that you guys trust it, then that's reputable enough for me to take the 10 minutes to go through that every week to look at it as a resource. And so
Right.
I think to the extent that you guys are continuing to build your network of notable authors and notable posts, you're going to cut through the noise.
Right.
And that's really what a service you could do is helping people do that.
Yeah, and just listening to you right now is something that I need to do more of. Listen to the veteran bloggers that might have, and it, I was thinking about even doing roundtable things like once a week, once a month, bringing in a veteran for a few minutes, let people ask questions, lawyers, because there's so many of them that don't know where to go. When I spoke at a Clio event, I think it was the year before last, and it was Bob Ambrosi and I up there, roundtable conversation about blogging and publishing and what it did to build lawyers' names. And then I just asked, I said, how many of you in the audience, have a blog? And, most all of them raised their hand, a large audience. I said, how many of you have your website company update your blog for you? About 80 to 90% of their hands went up. And some of them didn't know they had a blog, but they did. And some of them had explained that well, my blog, I pay for an update service of my blog, which sounded very mechanical, every year. And that includes the posts. And I'm thinking, wow, this has gone so far from where Matt DeVries started this. And I think it shows. I don't know how you can hear the voice of the lawyer and the fact that they've listened to people like you with somebody that is not a lawyer, that's a marketing person trying to put up content that's going to do well for search. I don't know if you've heard of that type of stuff, but it's rampant.
Yeah. I mean, there's instances where, some of the firm hurdles you have to get marketing out is sometimes a great hurdle, which is one of the things, I know this is one of those things that I was very purposeful when I joined your network. I spoke to another great, Daniel Schwartz, the
Yep.
Connecticut employment law blog. We talked about whether this was going to go through my firm or me. And I had to bet on me early on because at the time I was going to make an investment on Matt. It was not going to be reimbursed by my firm. And was it worth it to keep it with me? And I made that decision early on. And so as I transitioned from firm to firm, this is my blog and it's Matt DeVries of blank. And, I'm great to be at my current firm. I love where I'm at. It's got a big footprint. And so they welcomed me with open arms along with my blog. But that's something that I kept, published by Matt DeVries.
Yeah, I mean, Cordell always said people hire lawyers. They
Yeah.
don't necessarily hire the firm. Now, it helps to be at a good firm because it shows that firm values you being there and what you can do for people's or for their clients. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process you go through. I mean, somebody raised the issue in my company as one of the banks was changing the way they service payments for us, and they raised the issue, we're still getting checks from individuals. And I said, yeah, you're getting a check from their personal account. And they said, yeah, what's that all about? And I said, well, there was no way a law firm was going to say, yeah, we'll reimburse you, we'll pay for this blog thing, because the firm didn't understand it. And I said, there's some great lawyers. It could be you, it could be Dan Schwartz, it could be, Francis Pileggi, any number of them. Tanya Forsythe went on to the New York Times. Stacey Riordan in Fashion Law. They wrote the checks for those blogs out of their personal, husband and wife and husband checking accounts, and still do. They don't want somebody to take that away from them. They want that thing. I think it's crazy that we're talking about this because you forget that this went on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there were discussions when you went in, because you've moved from firms from time to time, whether there were discussions, this is my blog. We need to keep that clear. It's part of you.
I think, I had those discussions on the front end that, this was a, copyright published information by me, and I was bringing it in, and, if you guys want to reimburse me as part of my marketing budget, that's great. But, I own the copyright in 2 or 3 transfers of firms that's always followed me.
Isn't that your legacy as a lawyer? When you think about it, going back to law school, and you built this legacy through your publishing.
Yes.
You don't want to lose that. And I say that, Matt, from the standpoint that I didn't know until recently that it's been a problem for large firms as to what to do with the content that's been written, whether it's on blogs on the firm's website or articles or white papers when the lawyer left. They were glad to do something with them. There was nobody really to take them, so they just deleted it. And then I also heard that some firms were deleting posts after 6 years because their SEO agencies and consultants were saying it was hurting the search engine rankings of other portions of the site because it was older content. And I'm just... I'm thinking, man, these are lawyers a lot smarter than I am or was, that are putting up good insight and commentary. How can we lose that publishing? So when you asked earlier, what is Lexblog trying to do? That's one of the things. How can we build something that doesn't lose all of the publishing? It's great to sit down and talk to you. Like
No,
this.
I've enjoyed our time together.
I could do it, over a beer or coffee for the next hour. I have more questions that I could ask you, but you flip it on you. Anything you want to ask me before we wrap it up for today?
Yeah. So could you imagine sitting there in 2006 or 7 when you started this journey, what it would be now?
Yeah.
Was this ever anticipated that,
Yeah, I think it somehow you think it'll be okay because you can see something that somebody else can't see. I can tell you there have been tremendous roller coasters up and downs, because, you're not used to self-funding a business that all of a sudden has 35 or 45 employees and feeding their families, and making sure that you're not getting too far out in front. And then when things change, many times people have knocked on the door and wanted to acquire the business going back into, 2008 or 9 and more so in the last 5 years or so. It could be worth less today than it was worth then because back then it was, oh my God, everybody has to have that next place that they can publish, where today there's many, many alternatives they can get out there. But it seems obvious to me now, and it seemed obvious to me then, that lawyers should build a name, and the internet was the great equalizer, because who was going to knock on Matt DeVries' door and say, we heard you just moved over to Nashville and you've done some cases on construction law, and we'd like to have you start writing for us. And so when I saw the internet give someone like you the opportunity, I'm going, this person could have more passion than anybody. Yeah. Why not give them the keys to the castle? So I do think that anybody that does have an idea that really wants to roll the dice has to have a very trusting spouse to do it, chase that dream, and then have somewhat the ability to stick with it when things get very scary. And you talked about the role of mentors. Man, huge. You have how many mentors right now that you use?
I've probably got in-person mentors. I got mentors I pay for, and then I've got what I consider, I don't want to call them fake mentors, but I consider every book or author that I follow a potential mentor. One of the guys was Michael Hyatt. He was a Christian publisher. I started following him, and I moved here, and I was following him for years, and he was a publisher, and he started blogging as a executive leader, and he had to convince his board that blogging was the future for his company, and he's a publisher. And he ended up going out on his own, and I eventually met him in person, and great. But he was a mentor of mine for years, and I hadn't even met him. Yeah, I've to this day, I probably have a good 5 active mentors in my life, whether coaches, mentors of various natures.
Yeah, and I think it's relevant for bloggers too and lawyers in general, what you're talking about mentors, because I tell young lawyers the same thing. You need those compasses in your life, whether you're reading and I mean, I do relate to some football quotes because I went to Notre Dame and Lou Holtz was speaking to us one day and said the only thing that'll change you is people you meet and the books you read the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I go, "Oh, okay, I'll buy that." And the mentors was a big issue. So yeah, I mean, I'd ask you the flip side. Could you imagine when you turned on the internet and said, "I think I can write here," that it could take into where you are 20 years later?
I don't. I was thinking about probably the craziest blogging thing that happened with my blog is certainly it gave me opportunities to speak nationally, and I got picked up on trade publications and like ER. But I think I finally came of age in the blogging world when one day I came across a legal issue and I went to Google and I Googled it, and the first hit that came up was my own blog post that I had no idea. It was some mundane legal issue, and it was a statute of limitations problem on a construction issue. And the first post that came up, so I answered my own question through my own blog. So that's when I knew I'd come of success.
Yeah, I mean, I did it on ChatGPT. I'm doing research on there in this deep research thing. I'm trying to figure out what it is and asking questions relevant to my business. And it keeps citing me. So I started thinking recently, I go, maybe I should put these in some type of executive summaries to send out to people that somehow they'll think that what I'm saying is credible because this machine is citing me. Yeah, it was one of those things that was that crazy. But thank you much for being on, Matt.
Absolutely.
And if people want to find your blog, what's the name of it again?
So we've referenced it. It's Best Practices Construction Law, one word, bestpracticesconstructionlaw.com. And I know you mentioned my personal blog. It's thesameasyou.com.
And you're also
thesameasyou.com.
You're also on Instagram, so people can see you there.
Instagram, Matthew DeVries, and Facebook, Matt DeVries.
And you're practicing at a large firm with 18 offices. And we didn't even mention the name of the firm.
Buchalter. We're based out of LA and all across the U.S. and really landed here last year and just enjoying my time here.
What do you got coming up, Matt? The future lies ahead in the days and years ahead for Matt DeVries.
Well, certainly looking forward to practicing law here at Buchalter. I can see another 5-10 years. I don't know how long I'm going to practice, but I think in going through my practice and speaking and writing, I've really gotten a passion for helping others. As you know, I talked about I'd gone through a pretty bad divorce and the challenges that attorneys face. So I think in the last year I've reached out speaking at CLE events on ethics and work-life balance and finding good mental health. So I think that's an area of law where I'm looking to help professionals just cut through the noise and the chaos and lead more strategic lives and build better processes through discipline and strength. So I think that's an area where you're going to see me writing about in the next, 2 years, and I'll be speaking in those areas as well.
And if we can highlight your work in that area on the network, I'd be happy to. So as you start to do that and you're publishing on that, you'll let us know. Colin's running the network, and it's become more than just a collection of blogs published on our platform. It has to serve a purpose and be a place where people can find people that they can follow, that they can get to know, those words of encouragement out there on different subjects. So you will be heard. We can help to some extent, and you'll do it on your own. But I very much appreciate it.
All right.
Being on.
It's been so awesome talking to you and reconnecting. And I know years ago when Colin first joined you guys, having to work with family, I know that's been great for you. So thanks to both you and Colin for inviting me.
No, you're very, very welcome. If anybody wants to catch up with our podcast, it's only a couple, 3 months old. You can just go to Real Lawyers, and you can pick that up at any place that you watch or listen to podcasts. You can also pick it up on my blog. And Matt, one of the things you'll find funny is now when I search for Real Lawyers on Google, it's the fastest way to find my blog. And it's usually number one, except sometimes when lawyers have names that show up in Google AdWords and whatnot that relate to real lawyers. So, but anyway, thanks much for Matt DeVries, and look forward to next week.